Project communication. Let's talk about communicating with colleagues and your clients about what you intend to design for them. So let's get some nuts and bolts out of the way first. Every project, you're wanting to get the design specifications. What actually are you designing? Is it an Instagram post or is it a 24 by 36 poster? There's quite a bit of difference between a social media post and a printed poster, especially in Photoshop where we're working in pixels. It's easy enough to resize images in Photoshop down, but resizing up, a lot of times that's not going to give us the quality we need. So definitely get those specifications so you know especially what you're going to be designing in Photoshop. And any kind of design, this is important. Because you don't want to be wasting your time and the client's time by designing something that they actually don't want. And then just have a brief conversation with the client as far as what is your design process. And I don't mean the creative process. I mean the process as far as, okay, we're having this conversation now, we're deciding what we're going to design for you. And then 3 days later, we're going to have a first proof for you. And then you can have a review. If you need to send it to someone else, let me know and how many days that's going to take. And then we will have a second proof after you've made your changes and suggestions. So kind of go through how the process works, but just explain it to the client so they know, okay, this is how this is going to go down. They may be just expecting something perfect the first go. So explain to them, that's not usually the case. Usually we design something and hopefully we're on the same page, but they may have some things that they want to change here or there, and that's fine. That's okay. So just explain that so that they're comfortable with it. Let's talk about that feedback loop. So first, you start with a draft. This is based on your conversation with the client and your agreement on what is going to be designed. And then that goes to client review. The client gets back to you with their items that they want to change, or maybe they have suggestions for changing out an image. They may come up with a new idea that they didn't have at the initial brief. This is where you can make an iteration on that draft. And essentially what we're doing is we're making this project better each time we go through the loop. So after you iterate on what the client is telling you to do, you produce a new draft for them, they review it, and maybe they have more changes, and then you give them a draft. And if you're lucky, that's the final draft. So it's very common for even simple projects to go through 2 or 3 draft stages. The quicker you can get this feedback loop working, the better. A lot of times a client is going to have to send a final draft to a supervisor so that they can get it approved. You need to bake in that time so that you kind of plan out, okay, we'll do 2 or 3 reviews, and then we need to have, on the final review, we're going to need to leave at least 3 days so that they can have their boss have enough time to review it. So definitely keep this loop in mind when you look at the due date and just backdate from there so the project is done on time. So before you get started designing, it's important to kind of have an agreement what your intentions are, where you think you'd like to go. And this could be done during your first conversation with the client or, the day after. Essentially what this is communicating before you actually get on the computer and start putting pixels on the Photoshop canvas. This is communicating what your plans are visually to the client. If you can sketch in front of the client while you're having the initial brief, that's terrific. That builds great rapport with your clients for them to see their design idea come to life even before you get onto the computer. You don't have to be super good at drawing, but being able to show proportions of different things can give a good impression. And also it may be that you think, oh, this image needs to be very big. And the client is just thinking, actually, that's a subordinate image. We shouldn't make that super large. Let's just, the text is more important. So being able to sketch those things and get different proportions of things nailed down before you start designing is a great idea. Specifications, we talked about that. Know exactly what you're designing and have it in a document for them. So, have it written out so that they can say, oh, yeah, that's exactly what we need. Now, wireframes and prototypes are kind of similar, but we need to know the difference between the two. Wireframe is simplistic outlines of a product without the design features like colors, fonts, and images. Essentially, a wireframe is in user interface design designed to communicate how your functionality is going to work. So if something is a button, it needs to be, this place on the design, not necessarily what it looks like, but where is it on the design. Prototype, on the other hand, is close to what the final product will look like, but without a lot of polish. Basically, you're putting images and colors together and fonts, and you're generating essentially a final product, but it's low resolution, perhaps. Now, the fifth thing we'll talk about, and I have this as a homework assignment for you, is mood boards. And this is one of those things where I wish I had learned about it earlier in my design process. But a mood board allows you to get a set of images, text, photographs, and textures that you think are appropriate for your client's project. And this is looking at other people's work and kind of collecting it together, maybe taking disparate elements that you may not have thought of before and kind of explaining the vision you have for what you intend to design for the client. You could do it on actual poster board, or you could do it in Pinterest and take a screenshot of that. There's also other software that you can use to generate mood boards. Take a look at that article and take advantage of this to kind of, as designers, a lot of times we like to design things that we've designed before. When you do a mood board, it gives you the opportunity to expand your vision as a designer and look at what other people have done, and maybe you can do it a little better. So you iterate on their ideas, just like how we iterate on a draft to get to a final draft. Now, you don't want to copy other people's design. However, you can be inspired by it. Basic project communications. So, project scope. Essentially, if you're designing trifold, that's what you're designing. We know a trifold has 6 panels, so we need to have 6 different basic building blocks to get that done. Now, what happens with a lot of project is, like in the example of a trifold, you have this trifold, you're getting close to the final, and the client says, you know what? We need an Instagram post of that one panel. Can you do that for us? And usually that's not a problem. However, what is a problem is they keep adding new things. Oh, actually, we like that image, and if we can just put some text on it, and let's turn that into a poster. Okay, that's great, especially if you're charging per hour. However, what happens when you have multiple clients and you're hoping this project would be done by a certain date? Basically, this client is leapfrogging in front of your other clients to get their work done, putting it in with their initial project. So you want to kind of maybe avoid having clients feel that that's something they can do. If you can do it, if you don't have any other clients, just continue to, okay, great, we'll add on to this and we'll just set the clock running. And that should be fine. But be aware that scope creep on projects does happen, and just manage it. Like I said, this is something where, hey, if you can earn more money, that's great. But if it gets in the way of you helping other clients, then that's not a good thing, because you want to keep your commitments to all your clients. You keep everybody happy. Cloud collaboration refers to 2 different aspects. One is sharing drafts with your clients, and the other is working with other designers. So let's talk about the clients first. In every Adobe application, there's generally a big share button at the top of the screen in the interface. You just press that button and it allows you to generate a link that you can send to your client, and they can click on the link and it'll allow them to actually put their review and put little, bits of, here's a note for you on this, one part of your design. I'd like to change this photo out for something else. Or, oh, this is misspelled. Can you please spell it correctly this time? So it gives them an instant access to your design that you've worked on in Photoshop without you having to take your Photoshop file, save it as whatever format, PDF or a JPEG, and then emailing it to the client. This lets them collaborate with you directly on your design in the cloud. They don't have to have the Adobe apps to do this either. So they can just do it in their web browser. It's very easy. Also, Creative Cloud allows you to collaborate with other designers. And we do this through the libraries feature. Basically, a library is where you can put all of the assets that you may want to work with on a specific project or a specific client. These can be things like logos, colors, different fonts. The nice thing is that you can put multiple different types of assets in a library and share it to the cloud. Now, all these assets are actually on your computer. However, when you share it to the cloud, you invite another designer to have access to your library. That designer can go to the cloud, download your assets, and then they have it on their computer as well. If you have, actually they're changing the logo, we need to have an updated logo, you can put that in your library and the other designer will have instant access to that new logo. So the thing to remember is that you just go to the hamburger menu of the library panel, and that's where you can invite other designers to collaborate. So they'll receive an email. File management, new project, new folder. Every time you start a new project, just generate a new folder. Just make it a good habit. Put all your client materials in that folder, all your designs, that needs to go in that one folder. Don't just have it spread out in your downloads folder, on your desktop, in your documents folder, just hanging out. When you get that email from the client, make a new folder for them. And I would suggest keeping your source files separate from your design files. So a lot of times I will have a folder inside the client's folder saying from client. And so that's where I'm going to put everything they send me in an email. Like if they send me a PDF that's marked up with changes, I will put that in the from client. Or if they're sending me images, I just go ahead and put them in this from client so that if I need to go back to their original file, I don't have to track down their email. I can just go to this folder. So this is a folder that you don't actually touch the files inside. If you're going to use those files, you need to duplicate them and just keep them separate from your working files, just so that you can make it easy to go back and have the original file. So if you think, I need to bump up the saturation on this image, and then you do it in a lossy way in Photoshop because you're in a hurry. And then the client says, actually, that's not the look we're going for. Can you go back to the original? You'll be able to do that without having to, search for it. So keep those client files separate. Another folder to keep separate is when you have the final draft and the client says, yes, this is what we're going to do. I always have a folder called RTP, and this stands for Ready to Produce. And it could be printed, or it could be going to a social media platform, whatever. It's ready to produce. So that's where your finals of all of your projects are. I tend to keep all my iterations because it does happen from time to time that the client will go back and say, actually, I like that first draft. Can we just go back to that one? I don't like the additional changes we made. So I always keep my iterations so that it's easy to go back. I just label R1, R2, R3, R4, whatever. But the RTP folder is where you can put your final content. And this is the final slide. Thanks for listening.